Hey, what's up, everyone? It's your host, Ty Cole, here with Your Voice Media. And today I'm talking to one of the stars of the morning show. Okay, this is Apple TV's one of their amazing flagship shows. I'm speaking with Desean Terry. You may know him as playing Daniel. And listen, we love the show. Let me tell you this. I found out about this transparency. So, a friend of mine, he was like, "Yeah, I think you're gonna like this show." And I said, "Okay, what show is this?" He was like, "The morning show." And I'm like, "What is this?" So then he's like, "No, I'm telling you, like, you're a journalist. This is like a show for you." I'm like, "Whatever." So I take his password, of course. And then I and I put on episode 1. And I'm like, okay, like this is like cool so far. I was hooked. I binge watched the entire season in a whole night. And I was
What?
like, I did. I binge watched
Wow.
an entire night and I said to myself, I said, damn, I need more. Like, where is more the episode? So to see it come back for season 2 is amazing. And I have to say, you are one of my favorite characters. And I say that because of the layers that the writers give Daniel. Like, there's so much there that you can identify with him. I
Mm.
don't care who you are. Like, you
Beautiful.
identify
Oh,
with
beautiful.
Daniel.
I have to say that I think you definitely have been the one who's been watched it the fastest in one night. So you didn't sleep. You was just
No.
like you had a rough night then. Because that's a lot of drama, especially binge watching first season and where it ends. You was
I
messed up
was
hard in the day.
upset, but like in a good way. I was upset because I'm like, damn, how are you gonna end it like this and not have to wait a whole other year? Like, I was literally upset. But it's great. It's great television for those who are watching. So season 1 of the morning show, we saw you as this hopeful rising anchor. And season 2, it kind of looked like you lost hope a little bit. It was kind of fading away, you know. And at this point, you all should have watched the season. You ultimately, your character quits, right? So,
Hey, you just letting everybody know.
but I mean, it's been out for a whole month and like I'm sure people
You
know
don't
that.
know. You don't know. Yes, he's in a. I think he's in a place of transition. I mean, I don't know exactly what the writers are going to do. We had conversations in regards to what happened to Daniel at the end of season 2. What I will say, I feel for Daniel, whatever the next chapter is for Daniel,
Yeah.
I was proud of Daniel because, and not so much for the quitting part of it,
Mm.
but one of the things that Daniel says to Stella in that moment when he quits is he starts talking about his family. Daniel never talks about his family.
Never.
He never, and even if it was just a minute, that's never where his mind goes. And so that was really cool that he decided, yo, I'm gonna put this on pause or leave or whatever he ends up doing. But I'm put this on pause because there's some other stuff that I need to take care of. Even when they were saying to him, hey, this is the seat, this is the thing that you wanted, and not the way that I think Daniel wants it. I definitely think it's a part of it, but he chooses family and take care of himself. A little self-care, which was
Yeah. Are you happy with the direction that it went with your character? Like, do you feel like we're going in the right direction for Daniel? Like, how do you feel about your character's progression?
well, first of all, there can always be more. There should be more Daniel.
Mm.
Um,
More
and
screen
and
time
I
for Daniel.
and I also say that because I think Daniel's character and
Yeah.
what he represents in the show is so important. It's important to, I hope it's important to audiences. I know that it's definitely important to me in terms of how I represent an audience and me in that audience to
Yeah.
see a Black gay man who is feeling marginalized and put down. And he's also a great journalist. So he has the credits and, he has the skill set to be able to participate, but he keeps hitting that glass ceiling. So I think his story is so important. He is very much so the underdog
Yeah.
in the TMS world. And so I think his story is important. I think it would be important to me. I really do believe that if I wasn't in the show, that I would watch the show. I believe that I say that honestly and authentically when I say that. And so I know that that story would be important for me watching that show. But I also think that we forget that the majority of the world, right, the global majority, which is what we call it, the global majority is actually folks of color.
Yes.
Right. So this whole sort of, white space and, how this system is built in America, really and truly, the majority of the world isn't in that position. The majority of the world are like outside looking on that position. And even people who are white feel marginalized. So we ain't gonna talk about
that. Not the space for that today.
Not that, but the point is that majority of the population can identify as like, I am the other, because people feel othered because of their, their weight, their disabilities. And so I do think that, it's an important storyline in the show. And so I'm excited to see if we get a season 3 and all that stuff, what happens next.
I'm going to say when we get a season 3, because I just want it to happen and we're going to manifest that. Now, something that was really big was, I guess we're going to jump ahead a little bit because you mentioned just like marginalized and just how people kind of feel like watching in and outside of the box. Now, something that was said in episode 4 that really stood out to me and a lot of folks, it was when Stella told Mia that Dale doesn't have the it factor, that he doesn't have it. Now, popular publication NPR, they shared an op-ed on the morning show being quote unquote markedly different than the real life network TV morning shows this program is supposed to be based on. Now, with all of that being said, do you feel the storylines for this season was a way to set up the change we can possibly see if we are greenlit a season 3, or a way for us to continue to progress moving forward?
That's a good question. That is an excellent question. I don't have the answers. No, I'm being honest. It's above my pay grade. I can tell you what I hope for. I really do, and I really do think that we have storytellers that are that we have mindful storytellers who have been guiding this story, and they've had intentions from the very beginning as to why Daniel was placed in the position that he was in, and every step of the journey. I also want to say that the conversation with what has been happening with Daniel and also Mia, who's the other she's not the only POC, but she's the other black woman. She's the black woman on the show. The Black series regular on the show.
Yes, Karen Pittman.
Yes, Miss Karen Pittman. So what I will say is that, myself, Karen, Carrie, we had, I think also was part of when we were shooting it. We were shooting this during COVID. There was all this going on. So we had very intentional conversations about, and with the show, about, what it is to be a person of color in a white space. What is that like to see the system functioning, and you see a double consciousness, as W. Du Bois says. But that double consciousness of, I see this, we see, and in that scene with Alex Levy at the dinner party, Daniel tells her a little bit about herself and says, well, you actually, I see it this way.
Mm-hmm. You read her down in that scene. I have to play it back twice. I said, "Oh, Daniel."
Yeah, he went in, right?
Went in.
So what I'm gonna say is that I really do believe, and I hope that intentionality, that we take it further, because I think that I've seen the evidence and the manifestations of it and the seeds of it in the first 2 seasons. But of course, we always want more, because there should be more folks of color on the TV, on that show, and on all the other shows too.
All the other shows, we want more. Okay. Now, you shared in an interview with Casting Networks that you were auditioning for 15 years before you landed the role of Daniel. Now, did you, especially listening to the It Factor comment, and of course you're playing that out on screen, did you take from a real place to gain the emotion when Daniel found that out and let Mia and Stella know his feelings?
Well, you can definitely relate to that, right? I mean, I don't relate so much in terms of like the it factor, but what I relate to is having insecurity that sometimes, because of the environment that we're in, and I think in any workplace, that your insecurity, it doesn't really matter if the thing is true or not. What matters the most is if you actually allow yourself to receive it or not, right? And I think that Daniel vocally is like, nah, that don't make no sense, right? But I do think that it's really hard as anyone, especially if you're not getting to, if you're encountering a glass ceiling, because that's the point of a glass ceiling. It's glass.
Yeah.
So it's not like you can just see, hey, everybody look at the ceiling, right? So it naturally, it creates doubt within you, right? And for people of color and beyond people of color, but specifically for people of color, when we get into these situations, we talk about the imposter syndrome, right? Yeah. Where when you get into the room, even though you're educated, even though you've done the job, you've done the work, one of the agents in terms of how sometimes we keep ourselves down or manifest in our neuroses is the imposter syndrome. And so that is 100% relatable for me. Like, yeah, because I'm a human being, and I don't think that I can go to the places or express those things unless I can be vulnerable, be like, yeah, I've experienced stuff like this. I've had this kind of doubt. But ultimately, the whole idea of the quote unquote it factor, that is not, because that's such an obvious tool. Because when Stella says to Daniel that you have the it factor, that's coming from a biased system, whatever, sort of corporate system they created. And that system is inherently biased towards whiteness. And so I understand that. And I think Daniel knows that too. That's why I think he was calling. Am I allowed to say bullshit on your program? Oh, I just said it.
You said it's okay. You can say it. Listen, this is an open platform here. Now, what feeling do you want us to get from your character, Daniel? Because like you mentioned, he's a great journalist. He is a Black man. He is a openly gay man. So he deserves his place at TMS. So what feelings do you want the audience to get from your character?
Here's my ideal response to Daniel. I want people to care for his story. I want people to sort of, understand the arc of him, because I think he's integral, that they can relate to that. But I also want people to maybe at times be frustrated by Daniel. Okay. I want people to be a little, Daniel, why'd you do that?
Like when he was singing on the show. Are we gonna get into later?
Yeah, so I want people to be frustrated by Daniel, because I think one of the glorious things about the morning show is that all of the characters are flawed. So at times you may really love Alex Levy, right? You feel like she does the heroic things. Sometimes you might be like, that chick, right?
Bugging out.
Exactly. And so I also want people to find Daniel humorous, to see his humor and laugh at him. So I want the mix of emotions when it comes to Daniel, because I think that's what happens with the majority of the characters on the show. And I think sometimes when we are the Black man or the Black woman or we have multiple representation in our cast. However, there is, fewer folks of color. There's a lot of white folks on the show. Yeah. But sometimes we also fall into the trope then that, oh, well, then the Black character must just be completely integral. They must be and that's not reality. And that actually doesn't give people permission to, because if I feel like I need to be perfect in order to be the Black person in the space, then that actually is re-emphasizing these stereotypes and tropes that I don't think serves us as people of color. We should be able to make mistakes. The other characters are making mistakes, and they shouldn't lose then a sense of integrity about it. So. Right. Does that make sense? Am I talking in circles? I think I'm talking in circles.
No, I think you were giving us a lot of, first of all, great sound bites. But also I think just an amazing way of just understanding who Daniel is. Because I think a lot of times, especially even for myself, like if I mess up on something as a journalist, I shouldn't be demonized because I made a mistake. You know what I'm saying? I'm still human because my counterparts, they make mistakes all the time. I mean, we have a counterpart who didn't even listen to Adele's album and told her in her face, I didn't hear your album. You know what I mean? And I'm sure, he'll find somewhere to go moving forward. So I think that we are all owed that level of, hey, I kind of effed up here, but guess what? Like, I'm going to move forward. I'm going to learn from this and we're going to push through. And I think that's something that I would say Dan represents. But I want to know, who do
Can I
you...
say this also? I also think that, because one of the things that we do is that we take on this sort of agency that we're supposed to tell the story and we represent. And it's so interesting because I see that in Mia. Mia like doesn't want to mess up. There's so much pressure.
She's stressed out all the time.
Right. And so the show, I think, through the writing and the acting, and really, I think tells at times depicts a very sort of nuanced perspective of what it is to be the person of color in these rooms and the things that we take ourselves through. And that the system takes us through, right? Because it's not just us, but it's the system as well.
Yeah. You mentioned representation. Who do you think Daniel represents? Like when you watch the episodes and you see Daniel, who do you think he's talking to in a sense?
Well, I mean, especially for second season, I mean, representation matter in terms of how does he identify and who sees him. So if he identifies as this gay Black man, that he represents that community. I think he represents more than that because he's more than just his sexuality and his color. And I just know for myself, in terms of what I was drawing from, because we were shooting the second season during COVID, which was a very impactful time in my life because we were all in such a personal space. And so for me, I felt really comforted with what Daniel was fighting for when he was talking about discrimination, when he was talking about racism and bigotry. So I hope that many people can see themselves in Daniel, and it's open. But in terms of specificity of what I was sourcing from, I was really sourcing from, especially that second season, just sort of like the need for the big picture of what Daniel is fighting for, a platform, because he wants to believe in a world where we're all given space, we all have a seat at the table. However, we keep coming against these obstacles. And one of the things that Daniel says, it didn't make it onto the final episode, I think. He says something about a system that was not built for me. It didn't make it into the cut. I don't know why, but I think that's an important sort of phrase that he says. And I hope that people sees that. Anyone who's trying to challenge the system, who feels that there should be a place there, but it's not carved out the way that it's carved out for some of our counterparts, I hope they find themselves identifying with Daniel as well.
I felt that. No, you did. I mean, also, I think the reason why I was very, very excited for this interview as well is for some of the fact of, I'm a reporter, a Black gay reporter, and Daniel represents me, and not just sexuality wise, but also sometimes fearful of like, well, damn, like, is there a seat for me anywhere? Like, am I going to be on major platforms like other of my counterparts? Like, why doesn't anyone see me? And now I'm able to be seen. But when I was coming up younger, watching people like Free and AJ and, cis heteronormative or heterosexual, counterparts, I'm like, well, where am I at? And now we're in a whole different space and a whole different time. So when I see people like Daniel, I'm just like, okay, this gives me hope that I can become not exactly like Daniel, but I can have a space in this journalist world and entertainment, and I can be my true authentic self like Daniel, and I can still make a mark and make
Yeah.
an impact.
Yeah, and that's also part of the reason why we can't listen, or I think Daniel chose not to listen to the it factor, because the it factor hasn't put into perspective the unique sensibility of all we can be as human beings, and how an audience then responds to that. The it factor is looking for certain thing, quote unquote, that they've already established in the system, but you ain't had folks of color at this table before. So a reason that an audience tunes in for me and my voice and my authentic voice, or your authentic voice, will be very different than why they tuned in to Kathy and Joe and Becky or whoever. So it's like, so you can't judge it off of that. And we know this because it's been told to entertainers throughout all of time. Oh yeah, people just want more whiteness on TV. No.
They actually want the opposite.
We love diversity, respond to diversity because people feel seen, because that's actually that's the representation of the majority of the world.
Now, speaking of scenes, so Bradley's character is starting to explore her own sexuality. Now, how important do you think characters like Bradley, Daniel, and Laura are on television?
I think they're extremely important. I also liked that with Bradley, they really started to explore the gray area, that she's questioning, she's figuring it out, because I think people should be allowed to question and figure out their sexuality, and even if it's ultimately landing on fluidity, whatever that sort of sexual. I think in general, one of the things that I respond to in terms of thoughts going against sort of hierarchical, patriarchal thinking in America is that I often look to writers like Bell Hooks, and one of the things that's really been what I learned from her books is that labeling in and of itself is also an agency of the patriarchy, because when you label yourself, then that says that I am something other than, so that creates an automatic sort of standard, right? And so what I really loved was Bradley questioning, and even Laura pushing her to say that you're this, say that you're that. Now, I'm not going on either side and saying that she shouldn't label or shouldn't, but I'm saying that it's human, that we don't exist in labels. Like, we don't get up and just sort of like wake up and be like, I'm blah, 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 blah. It takes time. You got to figure that out. And it might change. So, so really, really excited that there are, more and more LGBTQ stories being told on the platform. I think there should be told way more in general. And I like that with Bradley, they also moved into that questioning. And I want to see more of Daniel's sexuality as well, right? I want to see his love life, or whatever that is these days. I mean, I know because we talk about it, but it hasn't come on camera because of some things that we did. But I want to see more of that too.
I want to see more. And that's a great way to segue into my next question for you. What other layers and elements you like to explore with Daniel? Like, what would you hope we get to see? Because we got a little bit of his family, not too much, and not even of his family. You just kind of messing and touching on it. But like, what more would you like to see from your character?
Well, I honestly would love to see what happens when Daniel gets the seat. I would love to see, once he's given the job, the position, what happens? What does that open up for him? Because that's the reality for all of us. It's also an important part of the story for, at least for myself as well, right? Someone who's been outside of the industry. Well, I'm not outside of the industry. I'm being dramatic there. I've been working, for quite some time, but in more and more success recently. So then it's sort of like, then what happens when you're given that? Because that is something that I think I know I need guidance with as as someone who's like, Yeah, because for me, it's always about, one of the things I like to get from stories is that there's not a guidebook to everything in our life. And I think that would be an interesting thing for us to now see, because I think we are more used to the story of like, this Black man doesn't have the power that he wants, but
Right.
more people are getting it, right? And also, even in the media landscape, more people are actually getting shows. There's more platforms opening up, right?
Exactly.
Nowhere, again, close as enough as we need to, but we're getting more shows that center Black voices, right? We only have one Black woman on primetime news now, right? Joy Reid,
Yeah.
right?
One.
You're right.
Only one.
So that's not enough. But I want to hear the story of then what happens when you get that seat. What are the challenges, and what are the new glass ceilings? Because I think that's the story we want to get to as well, right?
Well, we do have Amber Ruffin, but she's on a streaming platform, Peacock.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, that kind of counts, but like, I think, like you said, there needs to be a lot more.
There needs to be a lot more.
Yeah.
We gotta represent the population. And
right.
One.
That's what I'm saying. 1 out of 2, we can't do that,
That don't work.
Do you guys have conversations with local news stations like before you guys start filming? Like, or do you guys kind of just do some research and then you kind of like make it into your own kind of like England story?
I don't know what the writers do. I think they all have their own separate things. I know that there's a lot of sort of meetings and stuff. I know for myself, in terms of my research, I did go and visit some news outlets and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. If there is a third season, I don't know if I'll necessarily do that again. The first thing would be find out where the story is heading, and then sort of figure out where, because like we said last time, I mean, Daniel was sent to China. So who knows? I don't know.
You might be somewhere. Have you seen social media's reaction? Because there's a lot of people who love the show. And of course you've seen like some like other comments. So like, what was like the overall social media reaction that you've received in terms of like this season?
I'm in and out of it. So I probably don't have a full balanced perspective on what the social media perspective is on the entire season.
Yeah.
What I felt was there was a lot of energy behind Bradley and Laura. I picked up on that, and it's what I think often happens with our show is that there is sort of like mixed opinion on it, but a lot of people kind of sort of like, they were like, I don't like it, but I have to watch it. Which I think is, I'm excited by that. And I think ultimately for myself as an artist, something I've always craved, or I think is actually interesting, is for something to maybe make people uncomfortable in some shape or form, right? So I think the show doesn't play it safe. Maybe it does in some ways, but in some ways it doesn't play it safe. It does these bold things with its characters, which inherently means that some people gonna like it, some people are not. So I look at that as a sort of you're being talked about, right? So something of value is happening here because a conversation is stirred up around it. I guess that's what I'll say ultimately, is that I don't know all the nuances of the conversation. I know the general that, some people are for it, against it, get it. But I think my greatest sort of excitement about it is that people are talking about it.
Now, one of the stories you spoke about on the show is COVID-19, even after the pushback Daniel received. You also talk about this on your Instagram, on how the theater company you're a part of, American Saga, is hosting a free online conversation series as it has impacted you as well as it impacted and affected other communities of color. Did that part of, your storyline stem from like your real life concern? And also, how important is mental health for you?
So did not at all stem from, because I have no sort of thing in terms of the storylines. But I think that the morning show does a good job of trying to be relevant as to what's impacting our population right now. And so no connection in terms of that storyline actually occurring. And mental health is extremely important to me. It was, I felt some things during COVID, which is why, the theater company did that. Is that because I felt some things during COVID that was like, oh, wow, I can literally feel like sort of knocking on this noggin right here when, the specific thing for me was there was one day, or like there was a 48-hour news cycle. I think this was in the midst of Ahmaud Arbery, where it also came out then that, Black folks were dying from COVID. And it's just sort of like, I had such a realization, maybe it was because I was home and I was able to actually sit and process and be in my body a bit more. But it was such a moment of like, that's me, black man getting shot, Black people dying from this disease. Okay, I don't go out here, get COVID, mama, don't go out there, go get COVID. If the police comes up to me, so it just really got to me. So I felt like it was very important for us to talk about it and dialogue about it, because there are pressures that I feel like we see, we experience in the room, microaggressions, aggressions that we experience that other people don't even see, don't even realize that they're there. And so that's a lot to take on mentally. So to have an avenue to discuss and talk about it, I think is hugely important.
I love that. Is there like a tip you can share on like how you protect your mental health? Like what's one tip you can share?
Dang, I ain't got no tips. What do I do? Let me think. I have to have done something good about this mental health situation. What do I do? What do I do that helps
Maybe
me?
like it's disconnected from social media.
What I'm good at? I am good at just talking about it.
Okay.
I am. I'm good about talking about, finding somebody, and like I don't mind, me as a person, I don't mind appearing to be weak in certain instances. I also don't mind appearing to be wrong.
Yeah.
Right. One of my friends, one of the best compliments I felt I ever gotten, he was like, you're so funny. He was like, because, one moment you'll be like, he'll say, this is his words, not mine. He'll be like, I'll feel like you're the sage and you like know all this. And then in other moments, you'll be like, what's that? and so that's me. I just try to remain vulnerable and don't feel like I need to be, that I don't need to be the person who knows it all. And I don't need to be the person. And I'm in a lot of leadership positions in my life. I'm a leader in multiple areas of my life. And as a leader, I always like to say, yo, let's be vulnerable, right? Like I'm so comforted when someone tells me, and they're leading me, and they tell me, I don't know. And so one thing that I relieve that pressure to be like, I am fucking up or messing up and, have questions and don't know and all that stuff. And that helps me.
I love that. Now, you definitely had some vocal abilities this season. You started breaking out singing, okay? You were breaking out singing in character in one of the episodes of the morning show, and you definitely went rogue and had everyone in shock. Now, can you actually sing, like in real life? Like, are you a singer?
Can you sing? What did you think? What did you think?
I think it's there. I think Daniel was a little under pressure, so it didn't come out how he wanted it to. It's a little bit there. Well, listen, how about this? I think
no, let me say this. This is actually important. Okay. Deshawn is a stronger singer than Daniel. All right.
Okay.
And if you actually hear some of the notes that he belts out, I mean, you don't just belt those notes out. I'm just messing around. So I was, singer Deshawn ego is a little bit like, actually, I love this because a couple people came up to me and they were like, wait, hold up. They were like, were you like can sing and pretending not to be able to sing?
We're all like, what's happening? Like, I feel like he's kind of wanting to sing, but they're telling him like sing off key, but he wants to like sing on key. Like, What is happening here?
You know what was my inspiration for that? A part of my inspiration for that was I'm a karaoke enthusiast, right?
Okay.
I love karaoke. Like I love karaoke. It's so sad that I haven't been able to do a lot of karaoke because since COVID.
What's your go-to song? Like, what would you go to and first sing if you had a chance?
Okay, so I do a really good version of Valerie, Amy Winehouse.
Oh, because that's a hard song to cover. Deshawn.
I do a good version of Valerie. You can talk to my karaoke friends, but
Okay.
that moment to me, I wanted it to be like bad karaoke. You know, when somebody gets up there and it's the spirit, they'll hit some notes, they'll not, but you're like, but
all over the place, right?
Yeah, the spirit is there and the spirit moves you. So
Yeah.
that was my sort of like goal for that, and that's also what the writers wanted. I initially had imagined that Daniel was just going to get out there and be like, "Oh," and throw down. That wasn't what they wanted.
Give it to us. That wasn't
Yeah,
what he got to do.
No, they wanted it to be more about his neuroses and what was going on with him, and I think that was the more interesting way to go. But in then reformulating it to that way, that was the vibe I was trying to go for. Like we know that he could really do this, and he has moment where he does it, but he's overcome by the craziness of what he just did.
Yeah. Now, before I let you go, you're in a new project, Seven Guitars. Okay, it's one of your latest projects. And let us know about it. Why did you decide to join that cast? And what can people take away from the play?
Seven Guitars is done. So we closed that like 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. It was an August Wilson play that we did over at A Noise Within Theater. However, the theater project that I'm focused on right now is I am directing the Pulitzer Prize winning opera Central Park 5 for Long Beach Opera. And that's going to be June of next year if folks are in the LA area. I've never directed an opera. I'm very excited about this. It's probably one of the most adventurous art activism role I've ever taken.
Yeah.
Because it's all part of a overall intent and advocacy to get more folks of color in the opera space, both audience members and also telling let's not call it a Black story, because Central Park 5 is an American story.
Yeah.
The story of what America created. So I'm very excited about that, and that will be in June.
Wow. Okay. So we have that going. Is there any other projects you have coming up that you can tell us?
What else do I have? See, I do have things. There's stuff that I can't talk about, but that I can talk about. And just know your brother's always out here doing stuff.
Booked and busy.
Believe me, we got some stuff. There's some stuff already happening, but that's what I can talk about right now.
Okay. Now, last question here is for you. Now, as an actor, what do you want people to say when they see Desean K. Terry?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I got to think about that. That's a hard question. No one's ever asked me that. What do I want people to say when they say Desean K. Terry? I hope that they see someone that's dedicated, passionate, with both a artistic strength and an urgency and importance to his story. That, because I'm all about art, story, changing the world.
Yeah.
Right. It's also that Ava DuVernay quote. I'm bar off of her. Hey, Ava, we should hang out. We should work together.
If you're watching this, Ava.
She has a quote that says, if your dream only involves you, it's not big enough. So that I hope that what people see with me, that my work is not just about me, but that there is a larger purpose and intent for it, and that we center that change necessarily than centering me.
I may have to borrow that quote. So
I borrowed it from Ava.
listen,
Ava, you can't have it back.
You can't. We already done took it, Ava. But listen, what we can take away is how amazing you are as an actor. For folks who have not seen, although you should have seen it already, make sure you can see Desean Terry in The Morning Show Season 2. We're going to hope for Season 3 and look out for his directorial opera debut, baby, okay? Coming next year in the LA area in June. I want to hear you sing opera off camera, though. We're going to wrap this up here, but I need to hear this, okay? Thank you so much, Deshawn.